Welcome to A Cup of Gratitude with Amanda Schaefer. Hi, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you stopped by. This podcast is really for anyone, anywhere, anytime. And it's about taking a moment to slow down and look around and actually see all of the good things that are there. There's no question that asks, is your cup half empty or half full? But I think a better question is, what's in your cup? I mean, a drop of gratitude will benefit your life unimaginably more than a full cup of anything else. So let's settle in and take a look at how we can shift our focus and embrace the joy and the wonder of the life that we have. And once you start, you won't be able to stop seeing the good. And just like me, you won't be able to stop talking about it. And somehow that creates even more. Even in the midst of difficulty, even when it's really hard, learn how to drink from a cup of gratitude. Welcome. Today we're talking to Eric McMahon. Eric has been in vocational ministry for 16 years as a missionary, a youth pastor, and a church planter. He's currently serving as pastor of a church plant called Watershed Church in Northwest Philly. Having fought for racial reconciliation within the church his entire career, he's a charter member of the Culture, Ethic, and Justice Coalition, which seeks to be a prophetic voice to the church issues of race and justice. Eric's married to his high school sweetheart, Christy. They have 5 amazing children who all still live at home. He loves everything outdoors, and he's also a big jazz fan and can't wait to go to live concerts again. Welcome, Eric. Thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Glad to be here.
So I'm going to start at the very beginning because your story is really interesting to me. I love seeing where God started and where he has taken you. Would you tell us a little bit about your childhood?
Yeah. As you asked that, I always think of this old movie. I always think of where the guy says, I was born at a young age. But my childhood was not completely unique, but different than most people's. I think in that we moved around a lot as I was a kid. Like my family, we just moved. My dad I was not a military kid, but my dad just worked for a big corporation, and we had to move all over, mostly around the Southeast. We were. It was constantly. It felt like a different city and a different area, different culture. I have 2 younger sisters. One's only 2 years younger than me. The other's almost 13 years younger than me. So that was kind of interesting when she came onto the scene. But I grew up in a Christian household.
Uh-huh.
Church was a real big priority for my family. Both my parents made sure of that, and was taught from a young age that Jesus loves me, and that we lean on God for everything. He's the source. He's the creator. And so definitely had a Christian culture in my home growing up.
Wow, that's amazing. What a great way to start off. How do you think moving around so much affected you as a child?
Oh man. There was good and bad with it. Several of the moves were when I was a little younger. And so didn't notice those quite as much. And as I got older and we started to move, then, they became more difficult, as you're, mature socially, I'll say, you become attached to friendships and stuff like that. And so each time we had to move, I was ripped away from that kind of support structure. And that was difficult. So there was definitely some depression that happened at times because of that. But at the same time, I did get to experience different cities. And even though it was in the South, every city has its own culture. Each state has its own culture. And so there's a lot of different things that I was able to experience as a child that most people don't, because a lot of people grow up in the same area or really close to the same area.
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of things that I got to see that a lot of people don't get to see. And I got to know people from all over. Like I'm still in contact with people from almost every city I've ever lived in.
Wow.
And so that's really neat, and it's really funny. People always ask me, "Oh, you probably know this person," and it's amazing how we don't have to go far till there's someone I can connect with because I've just lived in so many places. So in that regard, it was really good, and beyond that, I can see God's hand.
Yeah.
In each of the moves that we've had, like, looking in the rearview mirror of my life, I can see, oh wow, God, I see what you were doing there. I see why this happened. And there may be even more stuff that I don't know or realize yet, but I can really see now how, even when I didn't like it, God was working.
Yeah. Yeah. And oftentimes we don't like it while it's happening.
Yeah.
But like you said, when you look in the rearview mirror and you see that it was a blessing, that he was strengthening you and growing you so that you could do what he had for you to do, it's a pretty amazing thing.
Yeah. I mean, there's one little town I lived in, and the friend group that I was really close with after I moved away, they really took a wrong turn in life. A lot of them did. And so, I just kind of see, I don't know why it was me, but I see kind of God's hand of protection in my life in that regard. It's like, man, if I was still living there and running around with those same friends, what would I have gotten into?
Yeah.
What would have happened? And so I don't know why God chose to protect me in the way he did, but I really feel like that move in particular was, Eric, this is a road you're going down, and I'm not going to let you go down it.
Wow, that's really beautiful. Now, in some of these moves and these changes that you went through, you had told me that your parents changed churches at one point, and you had been feeling really connected at the church you were currently going to, and they changed it to a much larger one, and you didn't want to go there. But what happened when you got there?
Yeah, so when probably the most difficult move for me was I just finished my 7th grade year, and we were moving from North Carolina to Memphis, Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And I was really, bitter is probably the only word I can think. I was really bitter about moving. And because we had moved from one town in North Carolina and only lived there for just 2 years, and I'd gotten plugged in there. And so then we moved again, and I was like, I'm not happy. So we got to Memphis, and we started our real estate agent, who we used to buy a home there. She actually invited us to her church, and we started going there, and it was great. I got plugged into the youth group, and started making friends pretty quickly, and really for, I don't know, half a year, maybe a little more, 8 months, 9 months, just really got plugged in and built friendships pretty quickly, and was having a great time, and was excited about, I was, the pain of leaving North Carolina while I missed my friends and culture there. It was starting to get a lot better for me. And then my dad said, well, one Sunday we got on Gary for church, and he started driving. Like, he didn't even tell us at first. We just started driving a different direction. I said, well, you're going the wrong way. He said, no, we're going to go try a new church this morning. I was like, but I was kind of like, okay, well, we'll go try it. We'll go back. And so we went one Sunday, and, it was fine, whatever. And then we went a second Sunday, and I was like, I want to go back to Emmanuel was the other church we're going to. And so we went back one week, and he said, well, I really want you to go try out this youth group of this other church. And I was like, man, this church is huge. I don't know anyone. You moved me here. I find friends, and now you want me to go to a different youth group. And he called the youth pastor and asked him to come visit me. And the youth pastor was great. His name's Greg House. We're still good friends. And Greg came and said, look, Eric, he said, I know it's tough. He said, but why don't you just come give us a shot on Wednesday night? That's when they did their youth group. Why don't you come give us a shot and see how it goes? And so I begrudgingly said, yeah, I'll come check you out. And so we went, and I'd already started playing football, get ready for school to start, and saw a couple guys from the football team when I got there. So that made me feel like, because I'm telling you, this youth group was massive. They had it split up by grade levels, And in just the 7th and 8th grade, there was over 200 students.
Wait, what? That is huge.
Yeah, so it's one of those mega churches, like a 35,000 member church. It was monster, and so incredibly intimidating. So I show up in the youth group, and I do see a couple guys from the football team, and I was just really relieved. So I kind of latched onto them, and we started talking, and that made me feel better. But then I just saw this really cute girl across the room, and I asked one of the guys. I said, "Hey, what is that girl's name?" And they said, "Oh, that's Christy Vela." And I just said, "Well, I want you to introduce me to her." A seventh grade Don Juan, I guess. So I was like, "Yeah, I want to meet her." And so they took me to meet Christy. It was just a real quick, "Hey, this is a new guy in town, Eric. He plays football with us, and his parents made him come here." And she's like, "Oh, hey." And I was like, "Hey," and that was it. But Christy went on to be my wife. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that is so cool. And how many years have you all been together?
So we met in 7th grade. We started dating when we were in 10th grade and dated for 5 years. And we just celebrated our 21st wedding anniversary this past January.
Wow, congratulations. Now that is really cool.
Yeah, isn't it? And it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a whole sermon in there, begrudgingly going somewhere, and then suddenly you meet the person you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with.
Yep. Yeah, there was times I tried not to. I tried to think I didn't want to date her, and it never worked out that way. And so, and she always tried to break up with me, but she couldn't get rid of me. So.
Well, I think that's an amazing story. And how old were you? You were in 7th grade when you met.
Yeah, I was getting ready to start 8th grade. It was the summer after my 7th grade year. So I don't know, 13, I guess, something like that.
Wow, that's amazing. So do you think that all of the moving and the changes that you experienced in your youth helped you in acquiring the deep faith that you have?
Yeah, like I said, I think there's so many ways. One, like I said, is I can see God's hand in everything. I mean, obviously, I moved away from what could have been a toxic situation with my friend group to a great situation where I met the woman who would become my wife. Made some great friends there. And really even that church. Dr. Adrian Rogers, who's a pretty well-known pastor, was our pastor at that church.
Wow, yeah, he is.
Just sitting underneath his preaching week in and week out, I mean, completely shaped so much of who I am today as a husband, a father, a pastor, just a man, just a follower of Christ.
Yeah.
And even we had a couple youth pastors and even interns on staff there, and those men like really poured into my life. And, just looking back and knowing how angry I was at times, how disappointed I was, how hurt and depressed I was. But seeing that each and every step of the way, God truly had my best interest at heart. And my best interest was putting me in situations that would cause me to follow after Jesus.
Yeah.
And so it absolutely, when I get in situations now that I don't like, or there's things that happen that I wish they wouldn't have, or I'm upset about something, or I'm tempted to become bitter about something, I just remember that God has a plan that he's working out. And I may not understand it. I may not see it in the moment. Something that he is doing at all times.
Yeah.
So knowing that he's at work gives me an incredibly deep faith.
Absolutely. As you were talking, I was reminded of this story where the Israelites come to the bitter water at Marah and they start grumbling. And they don't cry out to God. They don't remember. They just came through the Red Sea. They complain to Moses. Moses talks to God. They get the water turned sweet or whatever. But right around the corner was this beautiful oasis that God had set in motion years before with palm trees and dates and fresh springs of water. And, sometimes we're bitter, but like if we just hold on and we can have that faith in who God is, we get around the corner to what he has for us. And it's always this abundant, beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful point. Yeah. And, as long as we don't become weary,
Yeah.
With God. God doesn't weary of us.
Yeah.
And
Thank goodness.
who are we to become weary of him?
Yeah, thank goodness, because I get weary of me. I wake up sometimes and I'm like, God, how can you even stand me? You know, because I have trouble with what I think or what I do, and certainly we all have issues with other people, and it's just amazing that He loves us so completely, no matter what we're doing.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, after you got married, you had told me in our pre-recording call that you quit your job with the Tennessee Titans. Can
Yeah.
you share? That sounded like something you were really enjoying. Why you did that?
Yeah. So yeah, I did. I was a stadium manager for the Tennessee Titans. The first year that they became the Titans and had a new stadium, and I love the job. It was a lot of fun. I love sports and football and
Mm-hmm.
everything goes in that. And I'm passionate about the state of Tennessee, and so it was great. But Amanda, I worked so much. I'm not again, and I love hard work. Sometimes to a fault, but I just knew going into a marriage, I like you know, I barely had a chance to go to church. Like I moved to Nashville, and I never really got plugged in with the church, because of working in the NFL, for
Yeah.
an NFL stadium,
Yeah.
and so I thought, man, I don't want to not let God be the center of my marriage. Once we have kids, I don't want God to not be the center of my family.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like if I stayed on that career path, then my career was going to be the center of my life. And I just didn't feel like that was the right way to start off a marriage. I knew for me, I wouldn't be able to handle it
Well,
because I know my personality.
that is not only wise but powerful that you were able to put aside something that you really enjoy, but to know like what I've been given has so much more value, and knowing that you weren't spending time with God,
Yeah.
having that past where you did spend a lot of time in God's presence and you were mentored and you were constantly bathed in what was going on in His kingdom, and then not even going to church. It's good that you were able to recognize that that wasn't right.
Yeah.
Where did you go? What did you do instead?
So, yeah, my dad bought a franchise it's called Service Master. It's a disaster restoration and janitorial franchise in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And so he needed he wanted me to go in with him for that. He needed an operations manager, and so and it looked like it was going to be more of a 9 to 5 type job, and I hadn't finished college at the time, and so it just seemed like the thing to do. So we moved to Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
Wow. Well, it's a beautiful place to move to. At
It
least
is.
I've been there. I haven't been to Tennessee, but I want to go there so badly. Was it difficult for you to do that job? Was that something you had a passion for? Because you had a passion for working with Tennessee Titans.
Yeah. No, this job was first. Well, when I got in, the franchise that we bought was not in as good a shape as we thought before we bought it, as far as customer service and just reputation. And so, and the infrastructure, there was really very little infrastructure there. So I ended up working probably as much there, if not more, than I did at the Titans. And I definitely did not like it at all. Like I got to the point, it was one of those where I hated waking up every morning because I knew I had to go into work again. And I just lived for Friday afternoon, just to escape something I just despised, to be honest with you, for a couple days.
Yeah. One of the things that you used to do, was I know you really enjoy jazz, is you and Christy would travel from there to Philly sometimes and go to some of your favorite jazz clubs.
Yeah.
How did God use those trips?
Yeah, it's funny. So we would just want to get away especially before we had kids, and we would be driving into Philly, and there was one evening we were driving in on the Schuylkill, and we passed the exit for Roxborough Manayunk, right
Mhm.
there, the Green Lane exit, and we just saw the sign, and I don't know why, but I mean, I guess I kind of do now, but God just really laid on my heart to start praying for Roxborough Manayunk. And I told Christy, I said, hey, I think we should pray for this area right here. And
Mhm.
she kind of gave me like this weird look, like, oh, okay. She's like, I was like, no, I just feel like God wants to do a work there, and He wants to put some new churches in that area, and we're going to start praying for that. And so we just said a little prayer
Mhm.
on the Schuylkill while we're driving down there. I didn't close my eyes. I'll
Good.
be sure I wouldn't be worse than any of the drivers on there if I had. Um, but yeah, so we just said a little prayer for Roxborough Manayunk as we were driving in, and we that tradition continued every time we would come into Philly for a ball game or to go see jazz or whatever we were doing. We would pray for Roxborough Manayunk, and even after we were out of the area for a little while, we just would continue on a fairly regular basis, not like every day or anything, but on occasion we just remember that section of Philadelphia and pray for it.
Wow. Well, I actually lived in Roxborough at one time, and I know that they were in dire need of some really good, down to earth, believe in relationship with Jesus and read through the scripture Bible believing churches. And it's amazing to me because I still pray for Roxborough,
Mm.
and because I had lived there, and so it was one of my places that I just know there were things that I was not a Christian at the time I was there, but I also recognized the lack of choices because I tried to go to church there.
Mm.
Very.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I mean, obviously, we're here with Watershed now, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later. But
Mhm.
there are other churches who have popped up even before Watershed came here that are great churches, you
That's
know,
awesome.
and they've come since we started praying. They weren't here before, but they're here now. And I know it's not all Eric's prayers, but God was obviously doing something, stirring the hearts of several people for that exact type of thing.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And because I no longer lived there, but when I became a Christian, have family that does live there, I continue to pray too. So it's really cool that we have that connection that God had us each praying for Roxborough.
That's wild. That's working the spirit right there.
Yeah. So one of the things you talked to me about that I thought was really important, you had spoken to me that you felt at one point you were supposed to get your finances in order. How did choosing preparation like that help you?
Yeah, so when I was working in the Service Master franchise with my dad, like I said, I just hated it. And I think in a lot of ways, Christy and I would try to kind of do some shopping therapy is basically like we just bought things, whether we had the money or not, or whether we
Yeah.
needed it or not. We got into debt, and as God was calling me away from that into ministry, one of the things that God really convicted me about was that I wasn't being faithful in the small things, and the little things that God's given me to be faithful in, I
Hmm.
wasn't being faithful in, and the chief among those that I was convicted about was my finances, was our finances,
Yeah.
uh, because we were deep in debt. We really, living way above our means, and so yeah, so God said, look, first step number one is you have to get your finances in order, and so you know it's amazing what we did. We literally sold our home and most of our belongings um, to get out of debt, and
Wow.
we moved into my parents' basement, which was, you know, I mean, we had 3 kids at the time. Actually, Chrissy was pregnant with our third.
Wow.
We had her while we were still living in my parents' basement, and yeah, you want to talk about humbling and not ideal by any stretch. My parents are wonderful people. Like, don't get
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
wrong, but I think most of us know that it's hard to go back and live with your parents after you've been out, let alone once you're trying to raise kids the way you
Yeah.
feel to raise your kids and all that stuff. So, but that preparation, that was a real faith building time because
Yeah.
I thought I would make like this one decision, like, okay, God, I'm going to follow your lead and make sure I start doing things right for my finances. And I thought kind of like miraculously or magically, maybe I thought it'd be more magical than miraculous, that, okay, everything's going to fall into place, you
Yeah.
know, and it didn't right away. So it showed me, one, it deepened my faith. I mean, like really deepened my faith. It grew me closer to God too, not just deepening my faith, but more of that, like a true relationship with Jesus, not just some God that's out there, but a really personal and intimate God,
Yeah.
and friend and brother, that Jesus became. And it helped me, not be in a rush. It helped me
Mm.
learn to see a vision long down the road, that
Mm.
sometimes we're going to make changes today to prepare for 1, 2, 5, 10 years down the road.
Yeah, that's so important because a lot of times where you're being asked to be obedient or make a change is the foundation for something that's coming so far down. Like you said, you don't even know what it is, but you need that before you can do the other.
Right. Exactly. And it enabled me to take ministry positions that, I mean, like, just really practically, I could take ministry positions that didn't pay as much,
Yeah.
which we were willing to do, but if I were in debt, then I couldn't have served God, especially just starting out. It's not, you're not trying to necessarily climb a ladder in ministry, but at the same time, if you're coming in young without any experience, you're not
Yeah.
going to get paid. It's just like anything else. You're really not going to get paid a lot.
Yeah.
And so, kind of had to pay our dues there in a certain regard. And we couldn't have done that had we not been obedient with our finances and preparing to be able to be just free to serve God wherever he calls, and not let our finances be a chain or a weight that holds us back.
That's really powerful. I think so many people nowadays are finding, especially after going through the pandemic, that they've gotten themselves into trouble by being in debt. And I'm fortunate in that I had gotten myself out, and currently I own my home, I own my car, all that, those kind of things, have money in the bank. But I certainly did not for a very long time. And getting to the place where you can go through all of that and get to the other side, it deepens your faith because you have to trust God that whole time.
Yeah.
And there were times when literally would hand a piece of paper up in the air and be like, God, this is your bill. This is your bill. I am trusting you to take care of it. And slowly, but surely made my way out. And honestly, I would never want to go back. But I have a heart, as I'm sure you do too, for people who are in that position. And we can now help minister to them of the freedom and the goodness that comes from living biblically and not being in debt.
Yes, absolutely. And you know what, Amanda? The other thing that it's taught me is discipline.
Yeah.
I think Eugene Peterson has a quote talking about long obedience in the same direction.
He has a book of that. I love that book. Yeah.
And so I haven't read it. But I just think like the finance thing, and just with any discipline in life, any spiritual discipline, it's not just you do it once and you're good.
That's right.
Because like the finances, since we're talking about that, it's something that sometimes we've started to stray off the path a little bit. We have to kind of course correct over the years, but it's a discipline that you have to maintain throughout your life.
Yeah.
And the more you do that, the more you realize that, yeah, God gives us a hard grace. We're able to minister to people who maybe struggle with that or are in a bad spot, and we can share our story and encourage them, and also give them practical steps to say, hey, this is the way we got out. Here's some hard decisions that you may have to make to get yourself out too.
Yeah, and as a pastor or a leader of any type, to be able to be humble and talk about the times where you did have to change everything, you did have to course correct because God was showing you were doing it wrong, and to be able to share that also brings down walls that people are more open to kind of connect with you and therefore connect with God.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's and it's amazing how God will use that if you're open and willing to let him use it. And you're not trying to be perfect. I think so many of us work so hard to try to have all the answers.
Yeah.
and to appear like we've always had all the answers. But it's really okay to have messed up in the past and to still mess up now and to admit it.
Absolutely. I mean, my messed up, broken places are the places that when I share them with somebody else are normally the places where we really connect and can really bond. And like I said, the walls come down. And a lot of times people see someone who seems together, like I'm 20 years since I accepted Jesus just a few days ago. I seem a lot more together now, even though I'm not, than I was before. But when I tell people how I lived before, kind of their jaws drop and, like, wait, what? So I think it's really important that people know, like, not only, have I struggled, but I've been through all these different things when I tried to do it on my own. And now, even though circumstances aren't always wonderful or perfect, I don't struggle anymore because I know I can trust God.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Now, could you tell us about when you stepped out to plant a church in this Roxborough area that you had prayed for all those years?
Yeah. So we, once we got into ministry, we found ourselves in a place I'd never thought we'd live. We found ourselves down in Mississippi, which was a wonderful time down there. But I don't know, like, there was always certain places where I said I never wanted to live. Like, if God would have called me to the bush in Africa, I would have been fine going. I really would have been.
What's wrong? Why did you want to go to Mississippi?
Do not send me to Mississippi or Arkansas. Because there's just nothing. It's just nothing. There's nothing.
Yeah.
There's just, and it's hot.
Yeah.
There's mosquitoes and alligators and humidity. Those are the three things that I say. I mean, I think that's their tourism poster. There's just nothing there. And so I never ever wanted to be there.
Right.
But that's where we ended up. And we made wonderful, wonderful friends.
Yeah.
While we were there. But we were there. I was a youth pastor in Mississippi for about 10 years. And I was finishing my degree. I still hadn't finished my degree. I crammed my 4-year degree into 18 years. Because anyone can do it in 4. So, so I was working on that, and just God started. I loved youth ministry. Like, I mean, there was never a day that I dreaded going to work. I loved it so much, and just loved working with young people. I got to be an adult child myself by doing all kinds of goofy things.
Yeah,
and I got to see, real spiritual change happen in kids' lives. And so it was a lot of fun, and things were going really, really well. I was at a great church. We were comfortable financially as a family. They provided a really nice parsonage for us. And like, it was benefits, the whole 9 yards. A nice little small town, white picket fences everywhere. Life was good.
Right.
And so things are going really well, but God just started to stir my heart. Like, I started to see more and more, as much as I love reaching youth, like, I would see God do something amazing in a student's life, and like them committing to making changes and stuff, but they would go back to a home life that was really bad and pretty much anti-God in a lot of ways. And they were just in this constant struggle, because here are these parents who they knew they're supposed to love and trust, and then there's this God that they're trying to believe in. The parents are basically ripping the foundation of God out from under them every step you go. And it was just this really hard battle that I saw a lot of my students fighting.
Yeah.
And so, God just really started laying my heart, like, if you reach the family, if you reach the parents, and can connect them with God, unite them with Jesus, then it's going to be a much better place for the whole family. The students won't have it as hard as it. And so God just started really, putting that on my heart. And I mean, I seriously thought I'd be a youth pastor forever. But then I started realizing, I was like, well, no one listens to the youth pastor. They just don't. And the students only do half the time. And then, the adults in the church, even if you're contemporaries with them, they just look at you as the youth pastor. It's just the way it is. And that's fine. But, I realized that I started thinking, well, man, maybe I would have more impact on families as a whole if I were a pastor. And so I just started praying, and I couldn't see myself being a pastor. And I just started praying, and God was bringing to mind, this idea of church planting, which before I'd never really heard of, and it was kind of, becoming more and more talked about in our denominational circle and stuff. And so I started just looking at that a little bit and looking at the giftings that God's given me, and I started thinking, oh man, maybe, because I've always been a starter, like that's just what I do. And I thought, well, maybe that is something that God would call me to. And I was kind of just rolling it around in my head, and God started really just pushing me towards that. And I was like, man, what would I have to do? Would I have to raise financial support? Do I have to move my family? Like there was all these things. I was like, man, it's just too hard. Like I'm in a good spot now. Why would I leave it? God's working through the ministry that he's given me now. Why would he move me from it? And I was reading one of my textbooks one day, and the title of the chapter, my professor wrote the book, Dr. Ben Gutierrez. And the title of one of the chapters was, Is Jesus Worth It?
Mm.
And that really stopped me dead in my tracks, because I had all these excuses that talking to anyone would say, yeah, it makes sense not to make a change because you got a good salary, benefits, wife's happy, kids are happy, everything's going good. God's obviously working in your ministry, but when I read that question, is Jesus worth it? I was convicted.
Yeah.
Because basically what I was saying, if God was calling me, I was saying that Jesus wasn't worth it if I'm not willing to leave all these comforts behind to do what he wanted. And so I called the North American Mission Board. And hey, I just want some information about church planting. What's it like? How does it work? All this stuff. And, I knew that if I was going to do this, I wanted to be in the Northeast or New England. Because I knew that it was a spiritually dark place. My family is from this area. And
that I didn't know.
Yeah, so they're all from like the Limerick, Phoenixville area. Like that's both my parents, born and raised here, and still got lots of family here. So we came up here every year when I was a kid. Every single year we didn't miss. We came here to visit, and so I knew what the spiritual climate was like.
Yeah.
And so I knew it was going to be somewhere in the Northeast, and I was thinking Boston or Philly.
Yeah.
And after talking with them, they said, well, do you have family close to either one of those cities? And I said, I got lots of family close to Philly. And they said, why don't you consider that? And so I just started praying about it and still having this argument in my head with God. Like, God, I really hadn't told Christy yet either, because I knew she would kill me. And so, but then one day in my office, I was just reading I read through the Bible every year. That's what I do. I just follow a plan. And so I was on Ezekiel chapter 34, and it talked about God was calling out the shepherds, the leaders of Israel, because it says they exploited the sheep. Like they used their wool for clothing, they ate the sheep for food, they used them for milk. But when they're injured, they didn't go out and heal their injuries. That when they were lost, they didn't go search for them and find them. They're scattered everywhere with no one to look for them. And I wept, because I just felt the Spirit saying, Eric, there are people who are hurting and broken and scattered, and I'm asking you to go look for them. But you're getting fat off of my church. You're taking the money, you got a good cushy job, and I'm asking you to go look for some lost sheep, and you're not willing to do it.
Wow.
And so that day I went home and I told Christy, I said, I think God's calling me to plant a church in Philadelphia.
Wow. That's amazing. And, hearing him that way and feeling convicted and knowing that you're being called out and being willing to go. I mean, isn't he always just asking, who will go for me?
Yeah.
Wow. So let me ask you a question. I know that you went to plant the church. Who's a better church planter, you or Christy?
Oh, without a doubt, it's Christy. She was made for this. I thought I was made for this. She is really made. She is I'm kind of one of those functional introverts, I guess. Like I can turn it on in a
Yeah.
second if I need to, and do all the social whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and I enjoy people. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
but I am just as happy to be by myself as a hermit in the mountains somewhere, or just whatever, reading a book or throwing up the hammock or I don't know. But Christy, the more she's around people, the more energized she becomes.
Yeah.
And here's the thing about her, like when she buys into something, she is all the way in, and she has no fear about saying anything to anyone when she's passionate about it. Like
Yeah.
to her, there's no social norms, there's no line that you can't cross, and she does it in a way that you don't think twice about it.
Yeah.
And she just has a genuine love and compassion for people, and so she is extremely wise, and she is outstanding at church planning.
Well, the reason why I asked is because I know your wife, and I would agree. She's all of those things. She is just the most genuine, loving, compassionate, outgoing person, and she moves in a way where she sees other people's needs first, and it just seemed like the perfect partner for God to give you to plant a church.
100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Now I know that when you first made this move, though, you had kids that were being homeschooled at the time and that she was raising, so she probably had to stick to that first.
Yeah, that was, we have 5 children, like you read in the introduction. One of them, my oldest son, is autistic and has some intellectual delay, so he's always had to be in school. But we thought the best thing for the other 4 kids was to homeschool them.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, she was homeschooling 4 kids in 4 different grades when we first moved here, and that was tough because that took up a lot of her time. I mean, it took up all of her time, and it
Yeah.
definitely sapped all of her energy. And so for her too, being an extrovert,
Mm-hmm.
not being able to be out among people all the time drains her. And so, it was really tough. And she'd see me out, in the community, meeting people, doing things,
Yeah.
doing whatever. Maybe I would have on my calendar that I'm going to study, read a book on church planning or discipleship for 2 hours and then get to pray for another hour. She's like, you spend your day reading and praying while I'm at home. I got to prepare to plant this church. She's like, oh no. You can come home and teach the kids if that's all you're doing. But that was really, really difficult. I mean, I think every parent has probably experienced it this year, how difficult that is, but she did it for
Yeah.
years and without the support of, a school district
Yeah.
coming alongside of her. So, it was hard on her a lot of times. There's sometimes I remember she would call me up. I get a call and she said, "Where are the kids' birth certificates?" The birth certificates? Why? Because I'm enrolling them in school today. It's over.
Wow. I can only imagine. I mean, it sounds like, she obviously chose to put her family first. How do you think God used that to even grow more her compassion and her nurturing character for church planting when she was able?
Oh wow. I think first of all, I think she appreciates all of our kids are in school now, and they're all obviously much older. Our oldest graduates this year
Yeah.
from high school, and so, but I think she appreciates the ability she has to really dive deep into ministry.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it. But she also has a great way of ministering to women,
Mm-hmm.
who being a mother of 5 kids and having homeschooled them and all that. Like she just really has a deep desire to love women,
Yeah.
wherever they are, whatever they're doing. And as far as church planning goes, she sees the toil, like we can kind of see now. We talk a lot how grateful we are that we made the decision for her to stay at home and to homeschool the kids, because we see the fruit in their lives now and what that investment is like. And so I think for her and church planning, she sees how ugly and messy it can be, but she also knows that there's fruit that's going to come into that dirt and plowing the soil and spreading fertilizer around and all that stuff, And so I think she really has a passion and that a good big picture view of what we're doing and what we're building.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, God transplanted you. He took you. You guys were already in his kingdom. You're already growing. You already had good roots. You already had good fruits. He transplanted you and put you somewhere new. So you needed time for those roots to take root again and for you to be established and well to continue to produce in the new place where he wanted you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was hard for her to, her mother, she was born and raised in Memphis, Tennessee. And her mother had moved to Mississippi. And so she was only an hour away from her mom when we lived in Mississippi. And then we moved here, which is like, 18, 20 hours away, depending on how fast you go.
Yeah, so she didn't have the family around like you did.
She didn't have the family around. I mean, she gets along great with my family, but it's not her mom, And so to come to this new place and to be stuck in the house with the kids, I think she really cherishes the opportunity to serve and to serve that she has now. And I think it gave her time to sit back and see how God really wanted to use her.
Yeah.
Like her niches and what we're doing.
Yeah.
And she's found she does a lot of ministry with homeless and drug addicts as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she just loves it. So, I mean, she gets so much joy. She would just assume do that as any type of entertainment that you can think of. Like she will choose that every day.
Wow. Amazing person. And I just, like I said, I've gotten to know her enough to see her heart, and I just love seeing how God's using it. That's amazing. So could you tell us about, so the pandemic came along eventually. You're planting this church, you're working at things, and the pandemic came and changed those plans. How did that affect you, your family at home? What did you do to cope? What happened?
Oh man. I don't know, probably the same trajectory as a lot of people. At first, it was kind of like I think at first most of us thought, well, it'll all blow over in a few weeks. Yeah. At least that's what I thought. So at first it was kind of like we hated that there was a pandemic, but it was kind of like, oh, it's kind of nice to get this little bit of a break, it's, and it was fine for 2 weeks. But then as things started to unfold and we saw, oh no, it's going to be maybe a couple months or, we had to make all these pivots really quickly. It was stressful. Yeah. It was for me, one of the hard things about moving from the South to here is the size of the homes. They're all big places because there's lots of land out there. Here, we just live in this little bitty 1,100 square foot row home, and there's 7 of us in it.
Wow.
And so, I think for us, we really started to detest the sight of each other.
Well, you're not alone. A lot of people went through that.
Exactly. We wake up in the morning and be like, oh, you're still here. If I'm going to be really real. And so it was like it just felt like there was a ton of tension in the house, like just little bickering and you know how when you live with people, little things irritate you, and then I think it was amplified during the pandemic. And so we, as a family, we really struggled for a few months. Like it was tough. It was really hard. We tried getting outside of course it was March when everything shut down. So, in Pennsylvania, things can still be pretty cool in March, and it gets really wet in March and April here. And so we were just stuck inside. I was anxious, I was anxious as a father for the same thing I was anxious as a church planner. Now we raised support for church planning to help pay your salary and stuff. And we also take on offerings as a church as we're growing and establishing ourselves. But, I'm sitting there thinking, this could have a really difficult impact financially on the church and as well as my salary. And so like, I'm trying to sustain the church, but I'm also trying to make sure that my family stay. And it's the same thing with everyone else. Everyone else, was losing jobs or worried about jobs or furlough and all these different things. So, like I personally just started feeling an incredible amount of anxiety. Like it was just, you're constantly thinking about what do I need to do? Am I doing everything I can do? God, what's going on? You just lay in bed and the thoughts just run around in your head and your heart. And so that was tough. And I think, I think my family sensed that for me. And so I probably affected them. But what we found, we started just getting outside as much as we can. And we hadn't lived in the home we're in very long at the time. And the front yard, in fact, we moved into September of 2019, and the front yard was just a mess. It was overgrown. It was all weeds. It was nasty. And so, we had a little front concrete patio area that we hadn't cleaned up yet. So we cleaned it all out really, really well. And I went on Facebook Marketplace and found a couple of rocking chairs and put them out there. It was just nice and clean. And we'd sit out there, and we were sitting out there and started looking at the yard. And it's like, man, we need to do something with this. This could be a really nice area. And so we thought about kind of laying pavers around, extending the patio. And my oldest daughter, she said, why don't we just build a deck? And I had never built a deck before. I'm not a carpenter. Jesus is, but Eric isn't. And, so we started looking at it, and Christy's mom said, you know what, if you want to build a deck, I'll buy the wood for you.
Wow. And
so I was like, okay, let's build a deck. So we rented a U-Haul trailer and bought a bunch of wood, and we dug out like the entire front yard. All of us, all the kids, we all had shovels and hose and stuff, and dug out the front yard and leveled it all out, and we built a front deck.
Wow.
And that was like our coin. And doing that project together as a family. And then we landscaped, so we kind of have a flat part of their yard, and then it goes to a pretty steep hill. And so we put the deck on the flat area, and we landscaped the front, and we all worked together on it as a family. The kids worked really hard.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it was amazing how much that did for us. That was kind of like our family's coping mechanism, as we got outside and found a project that we could do together and be proud of. And then we knew part of the reason we did that too is we needed space to spread out from each other too. While we need to do a project together, we also needed to get away from each other. The deck extended our living space throughout the summer, and it was great.
Yeah, and in Roxborough, if that was your front yard, is also a place where you see everybody walking by now and probably connect with people that are neighbors and all that good stuff.
Yes, and even while, everyone during the pandemic spent a lot of time out walking because they're all feeling the same way. I got to get out.
Yeah. There's
nothing else to do. And so we had so many wonderful conversations with our neighbors and so many compliments about the deck. And in fact, last night, we were sitting out there and someone walked by and just commented on it, and we were able to have a conversation with them. So it was really great.
That's cool. Did you ever hear of the turquoise table?
I think you mentioned that to me, and I haven't checked it out yet.
Yeah, it was just a woman was trying to reach people for Jesus, and she wasn't having any luck, and she didn't know any of her neighbors, and she got this idea to take a picnic table. She painted it turquoise, and she put it out under this tree in the front yard, and everybody else's stuff was in the backyard. And she would go out there, and she would just drink her coffee and spend time in the Word and be praying. And all of a sudden, people started coming. People started talking. Friends started coming and bringing their coffee over there. And it became this whole way of connecting with people. And it kind of just reminds me of that.
That's awesome. That's a good idea. We might have to try to do that. Yeah. Well, it's funny because the guy who walked by last night, he just complimented. He said, I really like what you guys have done with your deck in the front yard and stuff. And I said, hey, man, you're welcome to come up here anytime and join us on this deck. This is for everyone. And
that's cool.
Yeah, maybe we need to put a little sign out or something.
Yeah, that's very cool. And the big thing about it was everybody else always stuck everything in the back and nobody knew it was there. But this was like this way to engage with people that lived around you and to not just be all by yourself, just your family, which is really cool.
Absolutely.
Okay, so when we were talking before, we talked about the pandemic, and we had said that sometimes we like to say God is in control, but we don't actually act like it. And I think it happens especially when we're leading in a ministry or leadership role. How do you think that being out of control during the pandemic changed you, your church, your family for the good? I know it's a big question, but I'm posing it.
So when I first left to plant the church, I had a friend who I went to high school and college with who was planting a church in New Orleans at the time. And I just called him to ask him for advice.
Mm-hmm.
The advice that he gave me has really stuck with me. He said, Eric, the only thing you can do um, is to find joy in obedience. He said,
Mm-hmm.
we try to find joy in results. He said, but the results are up to God. We can only find joy in obedience.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's been with me forever now. Like I tell everyone who'll listen, and so I think what the pandemic's done is when we got out of control, then there was only certain things that we could be obedient to. You
Yeah.
know, having a youth group is wonderful. I love it. But we don't have to have a youth group.
Yeah.
All these great things are great. So we maintained gathering together online as most churches did and do that, but we really focused on, okay, well, what can we do in the pandemic? We can go on walks. If we see someone, we can ask them if we can pray for them.
Yeah.
If they want to learn more about God, we can tell them.
Yeah.
And so all this started happening. We even had new people start to connect with us as we did this during the pandemic. And we're at a point now where our church goes out like people from our church. It's not even a church sponsored thing, but
Yeah.
people from our church go out every single week to pray, to prayer walk, and to connect with people, to pray for them, and to help them to discover God, what He's like, and how He wants them to live. And it's really easy to just rely on professional ministers,
Mm-hmm.
rely on a Sunday morning service, or to really rely on church programming to
Mm-hmm.
make you feel like you're living some kind of Christian life. But I think what the pandemic did, for me and for our church, as you said, we can just be obedient to what we see Jesus doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's enough.
Yeah.
And so I think what it did is it showed me that I wasn't in control to begin with.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
that's okay.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
actually the best place to be.
it is. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, because when we think we're in control, then we have all this worry, we have all this angst, we
Mm-hmm.
have we have all this busyness because
Mm-hmm.
everything has to be just so. But if we are just diligent in the things that we can do and trust God, which is very little, and trust God with everything else, which is a whole lot,
Yeah.
then over time we will see that God is faithful with what He says He'll do if we're only faithful with what He's told us to do.
Absolutely. And totally amen to that. Absolutely. I I am awed by how big God is and how caring he is, that he cares about every little detail and that he wants to have us join him in his work and he wants to use what he's already given us. And a lot of times we have talents that he's given us or we have passions or dreams, but it becomes our job to grow them, to fine tune them, to be disciplined in them, to spend our time with him, to have the best relationship we can have. And if we do those things, he'll do everything else.
Absolutely.
And it's amazing.
Yep. And we totally experienced that as a church over the pandemic.
That's so fantastic.
We truly have. We see. It's funny. Watershed Church before the pandemic, the vision's the same, but we're a different church now, and it's for the better. Like
Yeah.
we've grown deeper as a church, and our focus is more. We're more laser focused on living and loving the way Jesus did.
Well, that is amazing, and it's so fantastic to hear how what some people see as a negative thing, God used to bring something good.
Absolutely.
And then he's going to use you guys to take it everywhere, which is even better.
It's humbling.
Yeah, it is. And I continue to pray for your church. I tell the listeners. So I met Eric and his wife, Christy, when we were, my church was planting a church campus, and they were coming to our church before they had a church. So that's how we met. So the kingdom's really interesting how it works.
It is. Do you know the story of how we even knew you guys, your church plant was happening? Have you heard?
No, nope, not at
So,
all.
your worship leader at the time was Brad Steiger.
Yeah.
And I was taking online classes through Liberty University, which is massive. Their online thing is massive. And so at the beginning of every class, we have to do like a little introduction, like who we are, what we do,
Yeah.
why we're taking the class, whatever. And it's on all these discussion boards. If you ever done online, college, it's these discussion boards. And so I did that. And I mentioned in my thing that my family's getting ready to move to Philadelphia to plant a church. And this other student in the class named Brad said, "No way, I'm a worship leader at a church plant in the Philadelphia area." And so
Wow.
as we talked through the class, we he gave you the name of the church, and he said, "Yeah, you gotta come check us out." So several months went by, and we moved here, and we're like, first Sunday, you're like, "Well, where are we gonna go to church?" And we had a couple that we visited, and the first open Sunday, I should say. And so I said, "I don't know." This random guy in one of my classes said that he's a worship leader at this church called Keystone. Why don't we look him up and go see what it's about? And so I don't even think he knew that we were coming that day. Maybe because I don't think I had his contact info. So we just showed up, and I was like, I found a guy that looked like he's a worship leader, and I introduced myself, and we had a good laugh. So we literally met in an online chat room.
Dude, I had no idea. That is so
And what's
crazy.
funny is I love Keystone has become such dear friends of Watershed, and Mark, your pastor, and John Cope have become such big cheerleaders of me and just great influences of my life. It's amazing how God works that stuff out. And obviously our friendship with you and so many other people at the church.
Yeah, it's crazy. But it also shows that the church is the church.
Yes.
The real church is that we're encouragers. We're not in competition. We are supporters. We are all servants. How can I help? What can we do? And that's the church.
Yep. What's funny, I think the pastor, Mark White, the first Sunday there, he just met me. He gets up and he's like, "Hey, yeah, we got a guy named Eric McMahon here. He's planting a church in Roxborough. Some of you probably need to leave this church and go be a part of his church plant."
Yeah. I remember. I was there. Yeah. And you know what? He's always been a great guy, and where he said, like, hey, somebody showed up. If this isn't the church for you, let me help you find one.
That's exactly it. I've stolen that from him. I use that a lot too.
Yeah. But that's really what the church is. It's not about, you need to come to my church. It's you need to go to the church.
That's right. It's a family.
Yeah, it's a family. Absolutely. So I want to end our conversation, which has just been so wonderful. Thanks for spending some time with me.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Amanda.
But I want to end it with one question that's my favorite question because I love the answers.
Okay.
So, if you could give your younger self any advice, what would it be?
Oh man. Work out more and eat less? No. No. Seriously, I think if I could give my younger self any advice, it would be not to worry so much about what other people think.
Mm.
As I was a firstborn child, and like I'm just I spent a lot of my life trying to please other people.
Yeah.
And and it's not, don't worry about what other think, do what makes you happy. That's not the answer.
Mm-hmm.
Don't worry about what other people think, just pursue God.
Amen. That
Um,
is,
because we always think the opposite of not worrying about what other people think is just making yourself happy, but that's not it. And
yeah,
I've been down that road too, and you won't be happy.
that's right.
Not long-term happiness. I'm sure you'll do some things that make you happy. Like I don't want to act like there's not wonderful things in this world.
Yeah.
Like people always say, "Oh, money doesn't make you happy." I don't know. I think money makes a lot of people pretty happy. Like that's, I get what they're trying to say, but it's not entirely true. But my point is, if we just pursue God, like even people within the church,
Yeah.
sometimes will look at us like we're strange.
That's true.
But when you pursue God, there is such a joy, a peace, and a grounding in your life, a purpose. Like I was listening to NPR the other day, and they had someone talking about the term languishing.
Okay.
And it's just this sense that you get up and you go through the motions of life, but there's this overwhelming sense of emptiness, not depression,
Yeah.
but just this pointlessness. And you hope that if you just go through the motions enough, you'll find a point to life.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of times we wasted a lot of our time thinking that the point of life was to be liked by other people, was to be approved of by others or by society, whatever society says is approvable at the time. And that the purpose in life is found when you really just pursue the God of the Bible.
That's right.
When you open up and read the Bible, my pastor used to say this. He said, he'd tell new believers, start reading the Bible and start obeying what you understand. He said, don't worry about what you don't understand. Just obey the things that you do understand, and before long, you'll start understanding the things that you didn't used to understand.
Wow, I love that.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's what he told us, we heard him say that all the time, but I would tell my younger self to listen to that. Like, take to it and do it.
That is really great advice. Yeah, I agree. I spent more of my life not knowing Jesus than knowing him. I'm going to be 57 in about a week, and I just celebrated 20 years of being born again. And what I would say,
it's awesome.
Thank you. 2 birthdays in 1 month.
Yeah.
And the thing that I recognize is that when I invited Jesus in, he brought everything else that I needed. It's his presence that's everything that I need. And anything else, it's just gravy.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And his presence gives you a purpose.
It does. It does. I mean,
wandering around, what am I supposed to do with my life? Well, I don't know. I'll try this. That doesn't work out. Okay, I'll try that.
Yeah, all the things I've done that were scary that I have no idea what I'm doing. I wrote books. I don't know how to do that. I started a company. I don't know how to do that. I'm doing a podcast. No idea how to do that. But God does. And he asked me to do it, and I'm doing it. And I don't need to know why. I just need to do it. And I've been so blessed by it. Getting to hear stories like this, getting to hear how God is working in people's lives is just so encouraging.
Isn't there freedom in it too, Amanda?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, there's an indescribable freedom. Like, people think, oh, well, there's these, like, if you're following Jesus, then, you're not doing what you want. But I don't even know if words can adequately describe the freedom that you feel when you are just following Jesus. You're free from, all kinds of other worries and things to live up to.
That's right. You're just being who you are and being perfectly loved for being who you are and doing what you were made to do. I mean, what better place is there than that?
There's no better place.
No, it's good stuff. And I hope everybody out there finds it.
Me too.
Well, Eric, I just want to thank you again for spending some time with me. I really enjoyed our conversation, as I'm sure our listeners will. And it was just a big encouragement to me. I love sharing people's stories because I love to share God's story. They're both so amazing.
Thank you for having me, Amanda. I've enjoyed it. I'm humbled to be a part of what God's doing through you.
Well, I hope you have an amazing day, and I will talk to you again soon.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Hey, so I just want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. And I want to challenge you to go out today and to just take notice and to stop and really look around and find at least one good thing, one thing to be thankful for. You know, if you do that today, you're going to find so many more things tomorrow without even trying. Because once you start, you begin to see what's always been there. And if you need a refill, you can come join me again for another cup. Make sure to subscribe and have an awesome day and go be grateful.